actually did feel like an excited little girl, like that I had achieved this great feat. I'd conquered my nerves. I'd conquered my curiosity or any nervousness I had around the country being open and friendly to us.
Welcome to the Crossing It Off podcast, where we believe living with intention through a bucket list lifestyle is a great way to bring yourself personal joy. As you are crossing items off your list, you're actually filling up your bucket. The more items you cross off, the more joy gets added, until eventually your joy spills over into the lives of those around you. My name is Roger Williams, and as the host of this show, I will be interviewing guests, people just like you that are crossing items off their own bucket list. My hope is that by hearing these stories, you will be inspired and empowered to cross items off your own bucket list. Now let's start crossing it off together. Welcome everybody to another edition of the Crossing It Off podcast. I'm so glad you're here with us, learning more items that you could potentially cross off your list or hearing stories from people that have crossed stuff off their lists. And my guest has done that. Her name is Kerry Newsome, and she describes herself as a culture seeker, a curious travel lover, and an open to new experiences type of a person. Kerry, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
Awesome. So, Kerry, tell us, what did you cross off your list?
I crossed off opportunity to go ballooning over Bagan in Myanmar.
Okay, in Myanmar. Awesome. So where did that come from? Tell us the origin story of why you chose ballooning, why you chose that location. What was the drive for you to take on that item as a bucket list?
Okay, well, because I'm a little bit of an adventure seeker, I've always seen some beautiful pictures of people going ballooning. Mm-hmm. But in particular, ballooning scenes or pictures that I saw were over these magnificent pagodas. And the pagodas obviously have, that stupa kind of shape to them. And there was like hundreds of them in these pictures, and obviously beautiful sunrises as a backdrop. And I was always enticed to those pictures. And so from a very young girl, I've been always fascinated with the Buddhist religion and countries, obviously, that are steeped in Buddhist religion. And one of them is Burma, what we used to know as Burma, which is now Myanmar. So on my bucket list, it was definitely up there as a thing to do. One, to be brave to do it in the first place, as in, like, you're only held up by kind of cords and you're floating in the air kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And two, to do it in a country which is, relatively still new to tourists. They don't know a lot about Myanmar or Burma. Burma had been closed off to the world for a very long time. But I wanted all of those ticks in the boxes. I wanted to be brave. I wanted to do the ballooning. I wanted that setting. I wanted it to match up to that image I had in my head. So that was why it was on my list.
What drove you to be an adventurous person? What was something that happened in your life that made you say, I want to go out and experience things. I want to be brave. I want to be braver. What is something that happened that kind of pushed you towards that?
Well, I think my father would probably be the person that motivated me the most to be brave. He was a pilot. He flew his own built aeroplanes. So he used to build single engine aircrafts. In fact, he built one in our garage at one point. And so he was a bit of a pioneer and an adventurer in his own way. And obviously in the era of time that he was doing that, he was like really out on a limb, like way out. So I think that's how he got to experience the world and see it from a different perspective. I didn't get to travel when I was a younger person. I had a family when I was very, very young. So I was, when I was a teenager and a young mother, everyone else was out backpacking and going around the world and doing all that cool stuff. So I've kind of had to catch up. And that's why I guess, I have a bucket list in the first place because I'm running out of time to do everything. But certainly it was up there, and it met all my expectations, put it that way.
So let's go to actually crossing the item off. Did you go to Myanmar to do that specifically, or was this like part of an overall bigger trip for you?
Look, it was certainly the pinnacle. It was certainly the one must-do thing.
Mm.
My husband and I both went, and not so long ago, we went in January 2020. Now, if you think about that date very carefully,
Yeah.
that was kind of very lucky, in
Hmm.
fact, on so many levels. And we spent about nearly 2.5, 3 weeks in Myanmar, and it is such an amazing country. I can't even begin to tell you. But as long as we got to do that, I was happy. I just wanted to make sure that happened amongst our trip planning and everything else.
So you talk about Burma being closed off and them going through transition as a country and slowly getting into this tourist, trade, so to speak. Were there challenges to like getting this to happen? What did it take for you to like make the reservations? And was that difficult? Was it something you just had to do and go get in line? How do you actually make the day happen?
Okay. Well, this is how the moons align, put it this way. So I, in fact, work for a tour company based in Hanoi in Vietnam. And as you would be aware, Myanmar is very close to
Hmm.
Vietnam, which is kind of very handy. And the countries in Southeast Asia that this company, as a destination management company, manages include Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, and guess what? Myanmar.
Hmm.
So I only had to say to my boss, look, this is something I've wanted to do all my life. So as one of my trips when I go back to Vietnam, I want to tack this on. Can you make this happen? Can you pull everything together? And of course she said, of course, yes, that's what we do. So I really only had to give her some specifics of some of the experiences I wanted to do, some of the places I wanted to go, and she literally pulled it all together for me. So it was easier. It was made much easier. And of course, that gave me a sense of confidence as well. I wasn't going in there blindfolded. I wasn't going in there with someone that I didn't trust, or I didn't, who wasn't going to have my back, who wasn't going to have my best interests at heart. She knew this ballooning aspect was on my bucket list, so she made sure that she chose a very reputable company to do it. She also advised around the time of year, best to go if you want to have that, if you want all those moons to align, if you want that picture, this is kind of when you have to come to get it. So I went there with a great sense of ease, I guess, and wasn't disappointed.
So take us to that day. You show up. How was the ride to get there? What was the pre-launch, so to speak, of the balloon? What was that like for you?
Okay, so firstly, we had been in Myanmar for about a week
Mm.
before this point. So we'd kind of acclimatized. It was January 2020, and there was no whispers at that point about any kind of virus on the horizon or anything coming our way. So we were completely naive as to what was to unfold in the coming months. So everything was going swimmingly. We'd had a fantastic time. We went and we started in Yangon and did some of the major pagodas there, which are just truly amazing. I wish I could find better words to describe the feeling that they leave you with, because I want to do them justice, because you can't help but feel moved. I mean, my husband's not an overly emotional kind of person or that gets caught up in anything like this, but even he said, gee, I don't know what it is about this place, but there is a vibe, there is something. So we'd kind of got into that. And then we went to Bagan, and Bagan's a very, very old city. And when you come into the city, we had accommodation for the night before. And we had to, because we had to be up at like 3:30 or 4
Oof,
o'clock in the morning.
that's rough.
That's early. So we had to sort of get to bed early and get ready for the pickup, which was all prearranged as part of this. So it's January, it's very early in the morning, and it's quite crisp. It's quite cold. So you don't necessarily think of Southeast Asia as cold ever, but let me assure you, it was definitely jacket weather.
From my perspective, in my head, I think, oh my gosh, it's Myanmar, it's Southeast Asia, it's going to be warm. Is there a good time to go that you can experience it, the best of what I would say both worlds, the best of the climate being good, but also is there a better time to have the picture, getting the pictures that you want to get?
I think in the early months of the year, January, February are the better times. And as crazy as it sounds, yes, it gets quite cold. You are very close to the China border. So in January, February, it's freezing. I can remember having to go out the day before, to actually buy a puffer jacket. That was another layer on top of the layers that I had. And I've still got that jacket today, I might add. And I bought that at one of the markets. You would never believe that they would have such quality at these markets. It's crazy. But yeah, you will need to rug up in January. But to get that really clean air and that really pristine kind of environment, that is the best time.
Is there a rainy season there that you want to avoid?
Yes, that would be around the sort of the November time, around November, December. It kind of finishes in December. So yes, that wouldn't be advisable.
No, not at all.
So they arrange a pickup for us, and they take us out to this area just out of Bagan. And you've got to remember, it's pitch dark. It's black, and the organization that we had booked to do this was actually run by an English company. We later found out that there was various international companies running these programs with these balloons in Bagan and training some of the local operators in the ability to run them.
Here at the Crossing It Off podcast, we are passionate about inspiring you in your bucket list lifestyle and empowering you to live out your list. We offer many resources to assist you in your bucket list journey, such as web resources in the show notes, bucket list mentoring services, my book Live Out Your Lists, a private Facebook group for you to share your bucket list success stories with others, and more. All of these can be found at crossingitoffpodcast.com. Find the resource that fits your need so that you can live out your list. Now back to the show.
Because as you can imagine, they're quite a technical operation, as in, you've got a basket, it's attached to all these ropes, and when you see it, it's all collapsed.
Right.
Like the balloon is actually flat on the ground. There's this kind of basket, which you kind of don't think at the time is going to take 14 to 16 people comfortably when you look at it. But they sit you down, they give you a nice, cup of coffee or cup of tea. I was looking for the brandy, but they didn't offer any, but because my nerves were a little bit on edge, only because, as I said, you just have to wonder how the technology is so wonderful that you can put air into that balloon and it is going to be strong enough to lift that weight and then carry that weight. And then they're going to be able to maneuver it and direct it into certain areas. Like, you just have no concept of it at all.
It looks really primitive, right?
Well,
but there's a lot of technology or a lot of skill that goes into actually doing that.
Absolutely. And so I don't think I was alone amongst the 20, 30 or 40 people that were sitting around kind of looking at these flat balloons before they gassed them up. And the gassing process is really fascinating in itself because, and I've got some photos which I'll share with you later, but you actually see this light of the gas because it's dark with the
Right.
background. And then it kind of it just blows up like a balloon, like you would blow up a balloon. And then slowly but surely it sits upright. And then the pilot, which they call them pilots, even though it's a balloon. And I was happy to say the pilot in my basket had been doing it for 22 years.
Wow.
Which I was pleased to hear that he had been doing it for that long, in the case that I figured in 22 years he knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
And yes, so then once it's upright, and so I think there was about maybe 6 or 7 balloons to kind of accommodate the amount of people booked on the tours. And as I said, and they were all in different colors, which kind of comes into my story about the color and the setting and the background and all of that kind of thing. So I think ours was green, but there were some yellow ones and some white ones, etc. And so each company has its own colors. And that helps in the sky, because if you've got another company coming your way and you've got to get out of their way, they have a way of being able to use a walkie-talkie kind of thing and say, you've got to shift 15 degrees or you've got to do something like that. So that kind of technicality comes into it. But then once it's upright, they kind of ask you to come to the basket, and you kind of lift yourself up to sit in it, and you have a very small space inside the basket to kind of sit, to actually take off, and then you can stand. So you kind of get this very small corner area, and that's it. So then I don't know what they do, but then all of a sudden it just lifts. And I thought you would kind of find that lift feeling quite like you lost your stomach. You know how sometimes when you do something like that, you kind of lose your stomach. But I didn't. And it just effortlessly kind of kicked off, and then we were airborne.
So as you're experiencing that lift and you're starting to go up and higher and higher and higher, what's that little girl that used to look at those pictures? What is she saying in her head, or what's she feeling? What are you feeling?
Well, it's funny you say little girl. I actually did feel like an excited little girl, like that I had achieved this great feat. I'd conquered my nerves. I'd conquered my curiosity or any nervousness I had around the country being open and friendly to us, because we'd had that week and we were very welcome and we'd been treated very well by local people, etc. So I'd conquered that. I was with my husband. So that joint for us both, he was just as exhilarated. So for us to experience it together was just something wonderful in itself. But the pinnacle, I guess, of the experience was when the sun then came up over all of the pagodas, because there's thousands of them, Roger,
Right.
like thousands, and they're all in different sizes, and they sit like these little pots of gold around, if you can imagine, paddocks and paddocks of them. And they'll point out the names of some of them and all the rest of it. But it was truly an enriching experience. Have you ever done anything where you thought, well, now that I've done that, I think I could do anything?
Yes, I have.
Yeah? Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah. When I got finished with the Camino de Santiago, 790 kilometers across Spain, I was just like, what's next? Like I can do this. What's next?
Yeah, it's a fabulous feeling, isn't it? It's hard to explain to people, and that's why it was such a joy when you asked me to come on and talk about it, because I can bore people here all the time at home instead of then drive them crazy. But yeah, it was, and I think I was in how old? I was in my 50s at the time when I did it. So once again, it was that kind of time in my life where I thought, well, I don't have time to waste, so to do it now is the time to do it. And it was just everything that I thought it would be.
I can imagine. I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. But when you were when you had flown over the pagodas and you had, the sun was coming fully out and you started to descend, what were you feeling at that point? What was your, when you finally, the basket touched the ground and they're asking you to get out, what was that like? What was going through your head at that point?
Well, I had to remind myself that I didn't have the brandy because I felt like a little bit drunk.
Wow. Okay.
That kind of energy, or that feeling that you get, that euphoria, I guess is what I'm trying to explain. It's a high. It's definitely a high that you experience. And I thought, I don't know how I'm going to calm down. And by this stage, it was only like 9 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
We had the whole day to go ahead. And I said, well, what are we going to do after this? Like, I'm kind of still walking on air. But I think I was still recovering a little bit from the nervousness of how they were going to get it down. So we had to, we were very high up, so we still had to come down. How was that going to go? So the fact that kind of happened very, very easily and without any bumps or skips or anything like that. We didn't hit anything or get dumped in the wrong place. There was one balloon that kind of missed their marker a little bit.
Oof.
And was close to a fence, but nothing serious. But yeah, so it was that kind of high, that euphoria that, I went, my heart was racing, and I was just, it took me a while to kind of, okay, Kerry, settle, pedal, just, get on.
Yeah.
Okay, you tick that box.
So your husband went with you.
Mhm.
So I'm guessing it sounds like he was pretty supportive of what's going on with this. What was the reaction of other people, that your family, coworkers, whatever? What was the reaction of other people when you said, I'm going to go do this?
Well, a lot of my family and friends think I'm a bit crazy anyway, so it probably fit the bill perfectly. I mean, there was some nervousness from friends and family just about me going to Myanmar in the first place, because I don't know whether, if we want to sort of bring some history, it has certainly lived in turmoil for a long time.
Yes.
From a political standpoint, from on many levels. So there was some concern about me going to the country. The fact that I was going to then take on this activity of ballooning, oh, well, that was like power for the cause, like, oh, well, she's there, she's going to take a life in her own hands and she's going to go ballooning. Why not, Kerry? Of course. Yeah. So, yeah, there was a little bit of nervousness, and I'm so glad I did it, because, as you know, it went downhill for travel in 2020, yes. But also the country itself has gone back into political turmoil and unrest again. And I think while it's just back open now, I think things are still very tender in that area. And I think there's a nervousness about full travel coming back on, which is such a shame. I hope it comes back on.
Yeah, for sure. So if you and I were at the pub and you didn't know me really well, and we started talking and you told me about this adventure that you had, and I said, oh, I think I would like to do that. Besides just telling me, yeah, you've got to go do that, right? Just do it. What's something else that you could help me that I may not know any other way that would help me have the best experience that I could while I was doing it?
I think if you could take a leaf out of my book and spend a little bit of time in Myanmar first. Don't just, fly in, do that and get out. I think you would be doing yourself a great injustice. I think you would miss out on some of the beauty of the country and the people, the kindness and the generosity of the people that would allay any fears that you might have, and the quality and the professionalism of the organizations that put it together. I think people who swept in and swept out, we did meet some people and they said, oh, we're only here for a day. We wish we'd had more time. We just came to do this and we're moving on. I went, oh my goodness. Yeah, that's just not my speed. That's not the way I like to travel. I like to have time to breathe in the country and that. So, yeah, if you were in the pub, I'd be saying, get yourself there, have some time, have a look around, and then go and do it. And then you're going to get an appreciation of what those pagodas are about, learn a little bit of history, get a bit of culture under your belt, and then it's going to have a much greater impact on you, I
So
think.
you and your husband had visited the pagodas before you went ballooning?
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I
Mm,
think that's a great piece of advice because it allows you to have two different perspectives of the same thing. And I think that
yes.
that's really cool.
Yes.
Awesome.
And we
Uh,
had another day afterwards as well. So we went around, and there's various ways you can get around in horse and cart and all sorts of buggies and things like that. It's very old worldy. It takes you back in time.
I appreciate you sharing this with us because there's many of these type of opportunities, whether it's Cappadocia and Turkey or it's even here in New Mexico, in the United States, where you can do this kind of thing. I had never heard of doing it in Myanmar, so I greatly appreciate you talking about it. Kerry, what else is on your bucket list?
You asked me that question earlier, and I thought, gosh, where do I start? Look, I still have a few to tick. I think I would like to go to Alaska, and I would like to see that part of the world before anything further happens in the climate change arena that would make that difficult or
Less
just not,
majestic, yeah, less majestic.
well, less majestic and probably dangerous.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm probably running out of time on that one as well. So, something like that I think is probably going to be, and we're planning a big trip in 24. So that's probably going to feature on that list.
Well, you're real close to me, so if you are coming this way to the States, let me know, and
Yeah, for
we'll see if
sure.
we cannot hook up. Carrie, where can people find you online? What are you into? What how can people connect with you?
Okay, so I also do a podcast featuring travel in Vietnam, and it's called What About Vietnam? Because I had so many people used to say, oh, we're thinking go to Bali, we're thinking go to Thailand. And I'd say, what about Vietnam? And they go, yeah, what about Vietnam? I've been doing that podcast for 2.5 years. So people can find me at www.whataboutvietnam.com, Instagram, Facebook, yeah, Pinterest, all by the same name. What About
Awesome.
Vietnam? People can reach out to me, happy to answer any questions they have about Vietnam, even a little bit about Myanmar if they want to ask me about that as well. Happy to help people to experience these countries. They're fascinating countries.
That's for sure. I will put all those links in the show notes so that people can find them easily and get connected with you, Carrie. Again, thank you so much for coming and sharing your story. I loved hearing it. I love finding new places. So many of the honeypot destinations around the world are getting overused. So it's kind of nice to hear about something else that's majestic and awesome. So thank you for being here.
Roger, it's been my absolute pleasure. And I think you're doing a great job with your podcast. It's a great storyline. And I look forward to listening to other people's bucket list trips.